This is the Truth Network. Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it no more.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network.
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
Where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak
Your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
It is so tragic, right? 2 Israeli embassy staff shot and killed. I mean, young couple, beautiful young couple, killed outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, right? Unbelievable. And, right, it's with rising anti-Semitism and the controversy at Harvard, you know, the question kind of out there is how do Christians live out Romans 11, where Paul warns us not to boast against the natural branches? And how can we stand with Israel, and what does it really look like to provoke Israel to jealousy through love instead of slogans, so to speak? So, I am fresh back from Israel with my good friend, pastor and author Mark Blitz, and I am so honored to have him with us on the show today. But I just, we want to open up the lines for you to call and give us your thoughts on how we provoke Israel to jealousy and your thoughts of what is going on prophetically with all this? 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. And believe me, we want you to. 866-348-7884. How do you see it? And I love what we had so many rabbis come in and speak to us while we were on this trip in Israel, Mark and I, last week. And many of them spoke of Psalm 126, right? When the Lord brought them back into captivity like those that were in a dream, and their mouth was filled with laughter. It's a really amazing thing that they were asking us as Christians to Psalm 126, our fellow Jews, is what they were kind of saying, right, Mark?
That's exactly right. It was so phenomenal, the trip was, and I'm just so grateful that you came on this trip because you have such a large platform, and we really need to change people's perceptions of what's going on in Israel. Most people don't have a clue what's really going on.
Now, I would agree that I was shocked. Of course, I've been interviewing Jewish rabbis, et cetera, at the NRB for years, and has slowly seen this change in attitudes towards Christians. But there's so much there that people need to know. Number one, we felt safe as we could be, right? I mean, there was a lot going on. We're not going to say that there wasn't. But I never once thought, well, gee, we're in some kind of mortal danger because, they're completely have a defense system.
Yeah, we felt everyone felt not only totally safe, but extra peaceful, especially on the boat ride in the Sea of Galilee.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was more than peaceful, right? That was a worship experience I think everybody on the planet should have a chance to enjoy, to be out on the Sea of Galilee. And what's the captain's name? He's amazing.
Yes. Dan. Yes, I can't think of his last name, but yes, Danny. Danny's the name of the captain. That's his first name. I'll think of a second one later. But no, you're absolutely right. His is the only one you want to ever use because he is the best worship leader, which just really amplifies your experience there.
Yeah, because you're out on the Sea of Galilee, right? And you may think. Whatever you think about it, people thinking of you, I had a lot of family members like, Robbie, what are you doing going over there? But there's a sense of peace that transcends all understanding. There's a sense of joy and there's a sense of worship that came over both Tammy and I. I mean, I haven't seen Tammy have that kind of God moment that she had on the Sea of Galilee in years and years. Like she was just overwhelmed with a sense of God right there. And I can tell you that I even mentioned it in Encouraging Prayer this week as I did an interview with James Banks that, I guess I never realized how much God is coming after me in prayer. And my trip to Israel really showed me that, especially on the Sea of Galilee. It wasn't like I was reaching out to him. It was like he was reaching out to me. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I always encourage people to come to Israel on a tour, especially my tours. I just prejudice toward my own tours because we do things most tours don't do. You know, how many other Christian tours have Orthodox Jewish rabbis come and speak? I mean, come on.
Yeah, and that Orthodox Jewish rabbis is mind blowing what they share, and of course later on in the show we may talk about the red heifers. But one of the things we would definitely want to talk about here's this rise in anti-Semitism, but at the same time, right, all these prophecies are being fulfilled in Israel. And one of the rabbis that came in and spoke actually on Shabbat, he had a book. I mean, it were probably 75 scriptures of prophecy being fulfilled with the Jews coming back to the land of Israel. And he took you from the point of view of, when Mark Twain came in the 1860s and how desolate Israel was to what it has become in the last 20 years. If you can't see that God is doing something miraculous, your eyes aren't open that the place is flourishing.
Absolutely. He says in the prophecy of Ezekiel, he would restore them back to the land and it'll begin to flourish and blossom and bud. And that's prophetically what is happening now. And people need to realize, Christians need to realize they can be a part of prophecy, of what God is doing right now. They can take a part in prophecy.
Right, and I loved and every single rabbi quoted Isaiah 53. It shocked me. I was like, really? Every single one of them said his house would be a house of prayer for all nations. Now, for me, that's Jesus's words when he's cleansing the temple. But these are Orthodox Jewish rabbis who are telling us that, look, the time is at hand for his house to be a house of prayer for all nations right now.
Absolutely. Now, that's not Isaiah 53. That's in Jeremiah. But that is so true. And that is what people need to understand, what God is doing today.
Oh, it's beautiful. It absolutely is. And, of course, I get so excited I get my scripture mixed up, but it's okay.
Oh, no big deal.
But I can tell you this, his house is going to be a house of prayer for all nations. And for those of you who have never prayed at the Wailing Wall, that's a God experience that I will never, ever forget as long as I ever live. There was a certain way that you cleansed yourself to get there that I'd never seen before with these two-handed kind of things of cleansing your hands, and then you had to wear, cover your head with the yarmulkes, which they gave me. I have my own Western Wall yarmulke now, which is pretty cool. But I was. Go ahead.
No, I just said I love it. What you're saying?
Oh, I do love it, and so there's no explaining, what it's like, because God came for me. Like, he came over me as I touched that wall. The very second my hands touched it, there was this sense.
Electricity, huh?
There was this sense of God sharing his heart with me on how broken his heart was for people misunderstanding his heart.
Absolutely.
I couldn't help it but wail to some extent. I was like, oh, now I understand why this is a wailing wall, because my tears were just flowing down my cheeks, right? And Roman, our tour guide, had said, well, you never can turn your back on the wall, so you got to back away from the wall. Well, I didn't know how far you were supposed to back away from the wall before you turned around. So I'm just backing. And one of the Orthodox Jews, obviously, because he was wearing black and had the long, sideburns and all that. And he came over and he says, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "No, I'm a Christian." He just looked at me and then he was like, "Oh, I am so glad you came." And he greeted me like, it wasn't like, "What are you doing here, Christian?" It was like, "Man, I am so glad you're here." It was that, and that was the response everywhere.
Yes, exactly. And actually going there makes all the difference in the world. It really does.
And so, as we see, for those who are not familiar, Mark is a tremendous author of wonderful books. One of which is America at War, 24 through 2026, as well as God's Daytimer. And then hot off the press, he's got this Genesis audio-visual Hebrew Bible. So we got those things to talk about, these red heifers, all that stuff, but we need your calls. 866-348-7884. How can we stand with Israel?
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today's question is, how can we stand in light of all this anti-Semitism? Harvard University, the two embassy workers shot right in front of the Jewish War Museum. Like, how can we stand with Israel? What does it look like to provoke Israel to jealousy through love? We would love your thoughts or your thoughts on Israel, period. If you've ever been there, maybe your experience. 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. 866-348-7884. We're so blessed to have with us Mark Biltz. He is, as we talked about, not only a pastor, an amazing ministry to the nations, really, because when we were on this tour, we had like the future president of the Dominican Republic with us. We had a gentleman from Kenya, was it?
Yeah.
And we had people from all over the world that follow Mark's ministry, and wow, what a tour it was. But he has written America at War 2024 to 2026. It's a beautiful book, The Sons of Light versus the Sons of Darkness. God's Daytimer, the third edition, is out now and hot off the press. He's got an unbelievable book on Genesis. It is a translation of Genesis into Hebrew, but it's got a phonetic side to it to where you can actually speak it, but then it's got all these different audio and video components that you can download with the book so you can get information like you never saw on the original way that Genesis was supposed to be written, right, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. It's the first Bible that's actually alive. To think you can have a physical book in your hand and you simply put your phone over a QR code and you can hear a 5-minute video about that particular text, or you can hear audio files from QR codes where you can hear why corrections were made. Many people aren't aware that in Genesis there's some intentional errors as well as unintentional errors into the English translation.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting commentary right there. So, it's really neat how God in this age, right, this prophetic age that we live in, is provided information that just was not available previously. And one of the things that we got to see when we were in Israel is we went to where the caves were. They found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I knew quite a bit about it because of the Museum of the Bible people, interviewing them over the years and knowing some things, but actually stand there and see the cave, right, where they pulled out the entire, in one of those jars, they had the entire book of Isaiah, which, by the way, it's Isaiah 56 I was thinking about.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, they pulled out the entire book, and then what did you say? It was like 99-point-something% accurate to the Hebrew transcripts that we have today.
Exactly. There might be some a very slight, doesn't matter changes as far as in the words. Very amazing, just amazing.
So here are these jars that they were just found by accident by a shepherd. And all this stuff is available to us to validate how God has protected his word over the centuries. And now we have, again, all these people flooding into the land of Israel. And those are the things that really, like you said, it's budding, it's blossoming. And these folks are becoming more Jewish, because I did not realize, and I think it's important prophetically, that originally Israel was not necessarily formed as a Jewish state, but it's becoming more and more and more Jewish. Isn't that right?
Yeah, 1948, they were mostly Zionists, but a lot of them were communists, atheists, and they just needed a safe place to live. But that's from the prophecy in Ezekiel. Well, God said he would bring them back in that way. And then he prophesies he will sprinkle clean water upon them, and he'll give them a new heart, a new spirit. Well, guess what? that is referring to the ashes of the red heifer. So here we are at the point where they have the red heifers. And I believe once they have that and they can begin to pour the living water from the ashes of the red heifer, I believe that is the moment when the Jews are going to be awakened. And it's going to be mind-blowing. We are so at that place prophetically.
Yeah, and that's another one of the things that you do so beautifully in your books is explain how God's day timer is based on the Jewish calendar and how those dates are kind of opening up for us, especially with this idea that, and again, I can't believe Robbie's own eyes I mean, I was within, 5 feet of the red heifers. like there's only been 9 in the history of the world up until now. And then, wow, I mean, here they are in this huge prophetic issue. And not only am I there, but I'm actually in the occupied West Bank seeing them there in Shiloh. Like, really, Robbie, you get to do this? Like, I did get to do it. I got to be right there. And like one of the rabbis put it, that, you're living in the Bible. It's not a book of exceptions. It's an example. Like, we're taking part in what God is doing right now in this generation by spreading the good news of what he's doing and helping everybody get involved in it. Right, Mark?
Yeah, that's right. The Bible is to become alive and not just a history book, but to realize you are literally participating in prophecy unfolding before your eyes.
And it is unfolding. It just really, really, really is. And, some of the things that really just amazed me was the number of Orthodox Jews that are in the country now. And when I went to get on the plane, I have to admit that I was in awe of their prayer life. Like, oh yeah, they were lined up. There was about, because again, we were flying El Al, an Israeli airline, so we could fly in there. And even though a piece of shrapnel had hit, pretty close to the airport there, but there had to be, I don't know, might have been 80 Jews that were standing outside, while they were boarding the plane, and these guys were davening. Their heads were bopping down, and as they were praying with prayer shawls on, some of them seriously praying. And then what shook me up even more is on the plane, there was certain places that were actually prayer places where these people were praying throughout the flight in taking turns in doing that. And then when the sun began to come up, then they were lining the aisles wearing their, I think it's called tefillin, where they have the box on their forehead and the leather around their arm. And these guys are praying as the sun comes up. And I'm like, man, look at this. I know this flight is going to land safely. And it really does lend itself to some of the peace that you feel there, don't you think, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I really think people have to get over their fears and come to Israel and see what it's really like.
Yeah, I can tell you that it will be a trip that you never ever forget. And you have another one coming up in November, right?
October.
Oh, October.
And I can hardly wait, because this trip, we're not only doing Israel, we're also going into Jordan, where we're going to look at Mount Nebo, where Moses looked into the promised land before he passed. And we're going to go to Petra. We're going to spend the night at a hotel in Petra. And I really encourage people who are listening to go to Yosher Tours, YOSHER Tours, and look up the Mark Biltz Tours in October, or go to our website, esm.us. And please come on the tour. It'll radically change your life, won't it, Robbie?
Oh, I can tell you. And ESM is El Shaddai Ministry, so it's ESM. And is it .org?
No, .us for United States.
Okay, all right. El Shaddai, EMS.us. ESM. I'll get it right eventually. That's just highlights it, though. ESM.us, and away you go. And I can assure you that there are amazing accommodations. And, the tour guide that we had, which I don't know if you'll have him in November, but his name was Roman. He was a Messianic Jew born in Russia. And had studied archaeology on top of all that. And so he had such a varied background and so many understandings that were critical to really bringing the Bible alive and all those kind of things. So You know, what an amazing thing God is doing. You can call us with your thoughts, 866-348-7884.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today I'm having a lot of fun with my good friend, pastor, author Mark Biltz, and, you know, just getting into this idea of what is God doing prophetically. Well, you know, what's he doing in our lives is we see all that's going on in Israel. Obviously, it breaks our heart, the antisemitism. It breaks our heart to see emotions rising on both sides of the equation, right? But at the same time, you know, there's amazing things that are going on in Israel right this minute, and to go over there and experience it is it will change. I think the way that you pray. You know, I know it certainly changes the way that I pray and the way that I think about certain things and the way I understand certain things biblically. And I think that we are very, very blessed to live in these times to see the things that we're seeing where, to some extent, Mark, don't you feel like we've developed certain lines of trust with the Jews that we haven't had in the past?
Oh, I definitely do. What I see happening right now is a big dividing line coming within the body of Christ, within the church. I'd like to talk about the book of Ruth and how it's prophetic about the church, because we know Ruth and Orpah were both Moabites grafted into Israel. So Ruth and Orpah represent the Gentile church grafted into Israel. Well, if you remember, Ruth, her name means friend. She befriended the Jew, Naomi, went to Israel, worked the harvest, Passover to Pentecost, and ended up being the great-grandmother of King David. Well, what people don't know, Orpah, her name means to turn your back on. She gave the Jewess a kiss, turned her back on her, and it says went back to her pagan gods. Well, guess what? She was the great-grandma of Goliath. And so there's going to be a final battle in the church in these last days between the Goliath woke church coming against the church that is awake and friends with Israel.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful illustration and understanding of the Hebrew words and how everything really, and especially I know since you spent so much time in Genesis, every single letter is prophetic. It's not just for the time that it's speaking of. It's for all time. It's eternal because it's built on truth, and it has to speak to all time, right?
Well, see, the Hebrew language is the heavenly tongue. If you remember, God did not say, let there be light. He didn't speak English. He spoke Hebrew. He said, yeah, he, or. And so when we realize that in Hebrew, every letter is a word. Every letter is a picture. Every letter is a number. Hebrew is like three-dimensional. It's like the chemical language. God literally spoke and things came into being. But yes, even Paul, when he was knocked off his high horse, said he heard a voice from heaven speaking in the Hebrew tongue. People don't realize we need to learn Hebrew because that's the language we'll be speaking. If you remember, at the Tower of Babel, originally everyone spoke Hebrew. That was the common language. And then all the languages got confused. Well, guess what? In Zephaniah, God says he's going to restore back a reversal of the Tower of Babel back to a pure language. So everyone is going to end up speaking Hebrew, the entire world.
Yeah, I can so identify with that because, as you say, every single letter in Hebrew has a significant meaning and understanding prophetically all by itself. You don't have to combine it into words, but when you combine it into words, certain roots just to open up the Bible to gigantic concepts. And one of those concepts you find obviously in Deuteronomy 6 being what most Jews would call the Shema, where hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And that idea of one language is a big part of that. But I loved what you talked about in Zechariah being one shoulder, right? Go tell us about that.
Well, see, a lot of people mistranslate it. It says they will be shoulder to shoulder. No, it's one shoulder. Literally like husband and wife, we become one. And that's what God so desires, is for us to become one. But more than becoming one, he also wants us to be one under his authority. At the Tower of Babel, he was upset that they were all one, okay? But it's because they were one in their rebellion. And God wants us to be unified and one in our worship of him.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful understanding. And something I was working on earlier this year is the difference between freedom and liberty, right? In Isaiah 61, he says, to proclaim liberty for the captives,
right,
not freedom, because freedom, you're not under any authority. But liberty,
right, exactly,
you now have the right to serve God. You have the freedom to have the liberty to serve God, and you're at liberty. And so that was what Patrick Henry didn't say, give me freedom or give me death. He said, give me liberty, because he understood the difference.
Right.
And that idea of one accord is one accord under God in his authority. But quote that scripture in Zechariah that, believe me, I think 3 of the rabbis quoted it after I heard you talk about it.
Well, there are several in Zechariah, but I'll give you the one right now. This one is in Zechariah chapter 3. I'm bringing it up on my computer right now. Let's go here. Okay, just a second. Well, that is, let's see.
While you're doing that, I just have to tell you that, know, how delightful it is, right, to have Jewish rabbis come in and treat you as such welcomed guests, and and they could tell that you were hungry to hear and to learn, and they were hungry to learn and to teach themselves. It was beautiful. And so as you guys compared these scriptures, and I was just blown away by how consistent the message was with such different, diverse people. I mean, really diverse rabbis that we had a chance to talk to. But go ahead, you found the scripture.
Yeah, I meant Zephaniah, not Zechariah. Zephaniah 3, and it is in verse 9. It says, for then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one language, or one consent, or one shoulder.
Yeah, I love that. And I went and looked at it in the Hebrew myself after you guys talked about it that night, and I was like, wow. It speaks to the whole idea of, the Lord is one, and he loves it when we can come together like that in under his authority, but together in love, and it's a beautiful thing that we could be the very ones to be part of what, like one rabbi said, that to spur people to Psalm 126 to jealousy.
Right, and the problem is the church has never provoked Israel to jealousy. The church has only provoked them to anger. And that is a huge difference. And most Christians have no idea how to provoke the Jew to jealousy, which is why I want them to come to our website, listen to our live stream where I teach every Shabbat live, but they can also go anytime to listen to the archives. But I teach Christians how to relate to the Jewish people so they can be of one accord.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey that I'm excited to be part of, and we all can kind of be part of living. The Bible is the prophecies are certainly taking place, and according to God's day timer, right? There's certain years and the whole Shemitah moon cycle, and can you speak to that a minute about where we're at right now in this 24 to 26? Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing because almost all your listeners have heard of Daniel's 70 weeks, okay? And they know those are weeks of years. So 1 week equals 7 years. And they know as far as there's 1 week of 7 years left, they call the tribulation, right?
Right.
Well, they don't realize Daniel was Jewish, for heaven's sake. And the whole reason they went into captivity was because they were not keeping the 7-year Shemitah cycle and allowing the land to rest in the 7th year and allowing the poor to eat of the fields the 7th year. And so when he speaks of the 70 weeks of Daniel, those are 70 Shemitah weeks. And if there's 1 week left, that means the tribulation can't begin any day, any month, any year. It's a Shemitah week. So the tribulation has to begin the beginning of a Shemitah cycle. And the next Shemitah cycle begins the fall of 2029. So that would be the date the tribulation could start. If it doesn't start, it cannot start until 7 years later in the year 2036. So it's so important, and this is why in my book, America at War, I have all the Shemitah cycles and Jubilee cycles clear back to creation listed for everybody.
Yeah, which I've read that book, and it does. It provides all sorts of, fascinating information because as Genesis points out, that the sun and the moon and the stars were made as signs for the times.
Exactly.
Because we had light, God made light before all that stuff. So those things are obviously signs, but they're also, when you think about it, our time is rated on how we revolve around the sun, et cetera, moon, and those kind of things. And so it would only make sense that, God had it all timed exactly in his day timer.
Well, see, he created time and the signs before he created us. His calendar was created on the 4th day. We weren't created till the 6th day. And the first thing, when Israel was led out of Egypt, he gave them a calendar. He says, look, this is my calendar. Follow my calendar. But today, Christians follow a pagan solar calendar only because in Genesis 1:14, God said he wanted the sun and the moon both to determine the days. And so this is why sometimes the Easter is a month before Passover. How in the world do you celebrate the resurrection a month before he dies? The Christians have to get on the right calendar, which is why at our website, esm.us, we also have a calendar that intersects the biblical calendar with our current pagan calendar.
Oh, we got to go to another break. When we come back, this is your last chance. You got a question? You got a comment? We would love to hear you. 866-348-7884.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today we are talking about Israel and, what's going on with our current times is there's so much prophecy about what's going to go on with Israel, so much prophecy about what's going to go on, obviously, in the Valley of Armageddon, which I got to see with my own eyes, and God came over me there as well. Is so amazing what God is doing in our times. But part of what's going on, unfortunately, is antisemitism, as part of that fits into prophecy, unfortunately. But the question that we're asking is, how can we provoke Israel to jealousy the Psalm 126 way versus provoking them to anger, as we've done over the centuries? And if you've got a comment or a question, we would love to hear it. 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. So much fun with Pastor Arthur Mark Blitz, who puts on these tours to Israel in spite of what all's going on, because he uses the Israeli Airlines. We got in there a couple weeks ago, and I got to spend a week. And I wouldn't want to finish the show without our listeners to hear, Mark, what you shared. We are on the Mount of Olives, up near the top. And as we were looking down over it, I got to say, you shared one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard on where Golgotha was, but also on what happened that very day based on like we were talking about right before we went to the break, that Easter happened on Passover. I mean, obviously, the Last Supper was a Seder dinner. I mean, this was a Passover event, so these things should line up, right? And so here it was on Good Friday, right? It was right before, obviously, they were going to be celebrating Shabbat. They were there. It was that time of night, and you shared something absolutely about the blood that just took just blew me away. I will never forget, especially when you're standing there looking at these valleys, which form the letter Shin in Hebrew. It's just mind blowing.
Yes, we all know about the blood and the water flowing from Jesus' right side when he was pierced with the sword. And he died literally on the Mount of Olives. And he's facing his Father in the Holy of Holies across on the Temple Mount. Now, the temple faced east, so the right side is going south, and it's all downhill to the Hinnom Valley, known as the Valley of Blood. And under the Temple Mount, Josephus records they would kill 250,000 lambs in one day. Wow, you're talking if they each have simply a quart of blood, 65,000 gallons of blood. Well, that's like there's thousands of 55-gallon drums of blood. Where's all that blood going when they're being splashed around the temple? Well, they had these conduits where all this hundreds of thousands of gallons of blood would fill a cistern, but these cisterns also held 10,000 gallons of water, and they had several of them under the Temple Mount, and they would flush it, and there would be hundreds of thousands of gallons of both water and blood going through the dung gate into the Valley of Blood. They would see a giant river of blood and water. Well, guess what? At the same time, the blood and water was flowing from the Son's right side. We see a river of blood and water flowing from the Father's right side in the temple. And then on top of that, which most Christians aren't aware of, if you remember when Jacob thought Joseph has died, he rent his garment from top to bottom, symbolizing a broken heart. Well, that's what the tearing of the veil was in the temple, was the Father rending his garment, showing his broken heart over the death of his son.
Yeah, so beautiful. And when you're standing on the Mount of Olives and Mark is sharing that, and you can see it's so clear, how those valleys. And again, if you had the joy like Tammy and I did of going through Hezekiah's tunnel the day before, because there's a tunnel that goes under the city. All I know is it took more than 45 minutes for us to walk through it with water up to our knees that Hezekiah had built in order to have water during the siege that would happen from the Assyrians. And they let you walk through this tunnel, and it's not lit, so you have to have a flashlight. So it's really an Indiana Jones experience. Well, when you walk through this tunnel and you know what that's like, and you realize all the systems that they had in the city at that time, and Mark goes on to explain the way that they would flush this blood out, and you can picture it so well, especially standing there in that place and realizing what happened on that day. Again, you can experience God in amazing, amazing ways. And at the same time, it's so encouraging to the Jews that you're there. They are so really, you guys came over in the middle of all this that's going on, and they're so appreciative of your support, so appreciative. And I guess, is that part of what Psalm 126 is talking about, Mark?
I think so. I think Psalm 126 is one of my favorite. It is so incredible where the Jews are finally saying, their mouths are filled with laughter. God does great things for us. It's like a dream. He's turned our captivity. And this is the famous verse everyone knows where it says, he who goes forth and weeps, bears precious seed, will doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. And I think right now the part of that is being fulfilled, but Satan hates it, which is why there's all this terrorism going on.
Yeah, but yet there's a piece there that again transcends all understanding, and it's an adventure of adventures, and to actually see what's going on. And believe me, when you begin to see the way they have populated this country, and one of the last things that we did when we were there, which I felt so honored, is we were taken to one of the furthest outposts in Judah, in the area of Judah, where is essentially the West Bank of I'll let you describe it better than me, but you get to go there and see how they can turn absolute desert and into this unbelievably lush, green, beautiful orchard.
Oh, absolutely, because God has kept it barren for 2,000 years so no one would claim it or want it. And then the Jews come back, and all of a sudden it blossoms and blooms and comes to life. But yes, as you said, it's Judea. We should be using the term West Bank. We should be using the term Judea and Samaria. But this is definitely the land of Judea. And it was so wonderful going there, listening to a rabbi who is a soldier talk to us, about what the Lord is doing. And it was so exciting.
Oh, it was beyond cool. And, it was just a worship experience all the way. But again, I grew up in New Mexico and out west, and I've, been in the Mojave Desert. I've seen desert. Oh, my goodness. I mean, there are places out there by the Dead Sea. I'm like, I've never seen anything so desolate in all my life. And so when all of a sudden you see this unbelievable, green orchard coming up with all this green stuff, in the middle of what you, and it was funny because he said, I wasn't a farmer when I came out here. They just said, go plant some stuff. So it wasn't like he really had the magic formula going out there. What the magic formula he had is God is going to make it bloom and bud.
Exactly.
And again, you get to go out there, you get to take part in that. And because of Mark's connections within the Jewish community, they come in and they rejoice with you, and you get a chance to hear what they really, have to offer. And then again, when we got to go to Shiloh, which was, and see these red heifers and really begin to understand what a picture of Christ that was, and still is a continual offering. It brings numbers, 19 to life like you've never had it in your life.
Exactly.
And so we're so grateful. Again, we only have a couple minutes left. Tell people how they can access Yosher Tours and, again, El Shaddai Ministries.
Sure. It's just yoshertours.com. And then they have a whole lot of tours. Look for the one that says Mark Biltz this October. And then, of course, next year in April, we're going to Jordan and Saudi Arabia. We're going to be at the very place that the Israel crossed the Red Sea on the very day they crossed the Red Sea. This is just mind-blowing. But you can also go to our website, esm.us. That's El Shaddai Ministries, United States, esm.us. You want to get the book of Genesis that I wrote, and you also want to get a calendar and the book America at War.
Yeah, they're all there on Amazon. If you look under Mark Biltz's name, it's Bitz. Pretty simple.
Biltz.
Biltz. And again, he's got all his books there that he's written. Wonderful author, teacher. And again, he has every Shabbat. In other words, it's Friday night. Won't be long, right? The sun goes down.
That's right.
And so what time is that broadcast?
Well, Pacific time is at 9 and 11:45.
In the morning?
Yep, that's Pacific time. But, of course, people can go and watch it whenever they want on YouTube.
Right. So you got all that going on, and he explains the Hebrew and gives these prophecies again because he has these connections. And as I recall, isn't one of your neighbors like a phenomenal Hebrew scholar?
Yes, he's the one we did the book of Genesis with in Hebrew. He's like the number one. He teaches Hebrew to the Hebrews. Yeah, he's the best.
So how wonderful. Well, Mark, again, it's so much fun to be with you. And
well, thank you.
Shalom is the best thing I can possibly say.
Well, thank you so much.
God bless. And for all those listening, thank you so much. Have a great Shabbat as you enter into this weekend and this Memorial Day. Pay some attention to some soldiers. God bless.
Amen. Bye.